What's going on, guys? It is Mitch Motormass here, coming at you with another Dirt edition of the Rate My Ride series. This time we are looking at the southwest part of the Otways, so we're looking at in between Labbers Hill and about Princetown on the coast, on that west side. So this is found about 3 hours southwest of Melbourne. It is one of the largest sort of dirt areas that actually be really good for adventure bike riding, and I'm sure at some point when I get T7 or some sort of adventure bike, I'll be able to come down here and talk about how it is on an adventure bike versus an enduro. Yeah, so that's sort of its location. It is one where it's pretty necessary to have a long range tank to sort of get the most out of. You're not going to get a lot with shorter range tanks, so you need something 12 litres plus, I'd say. If you don't have a big tank, you'll need to bring, a small little set of fuel with you, like the other Mitch did when we went out riding that way, just as a sort of thing. It is pretty close to a lot of farmland and a lot of private property, so it is very important that you're really careful about where you're going and making sure you're not ending up, accidentally or on anyone's property. Just purely from you don't want that hassle of, annoying people and having to apologise and all that jazz. So just be really aware with this area. It's probably, out of all the areas I've done so far, it's probably the area where you're at the most risk of doing that, just because the difference between tracks and private properties is actually really hard to pick sometimes. Fence lines are hard to see and all of that. In terms of the parking and access, there's, from what I could tell, purely because we were leaving from private property when we're out in this area, it is actually pretty hard to find parking, but there are some caravan parks and stuff that you can camp at, and so you're able to hit multiple things. You just need to have some jerry cans with you, so you don't have to go out and get fuel every single time. But yeah, so the parking and access is not the best, but it's findable. There's a lot of roads that access to it, and there's a few entrances to it that are off bitumen roads. At Labbers Hill, you can pretty much just go down the back of the little what is it? It's like a little cafe style thing. It doesn't have petrol, which is really annoying, but you can go pretty much straight out the back of that and you'll get right onto the trails in a matter of maybe 300-400 meters. Yeah, so it's got some spots where you can access, and there's parts where if you're at the coast, it's sort of Princetown at the other end of the old Ocean Road, you'll find that you can access, there's quite a few nice spots to park and caravan parks and things like that to stay at, so there is options in terms of having secure places to park and things like that. It is just sometimes a little bit of pain to find. Yeah, that's the main thing. There was some bridge closures when we were down there, but apparently they were in the midst of rebuilding it, so it should be rebuilt by now, because it has been a while since I was there. But that is something that just to keep in mind, that there is bridge crossings and things like that, which means there is some likelihood of the bridges being out of order. So just keep that aware, see if you can find anything on, the local area websites before you head through. Google Maps might have some of the bridge closures and things like that, and roadworks and stuff going on, but that's like any area you're going to find roadworks and things like that. Yeah, so the difficulty level, for the most part, depending on whether if you're looking at it from Jallabrain, which is basically where we were leaving, anything on the east is fairly straightforward. Anything on the west you will find some rather difficult spots, but actually, in my opinion, everything here was super easy. Other than your first sort of exposure to sand riding if you haven't ridden sand before. Other than that, we didn't really trek through anything insanely difficult. There was a couple of awkward hill climbs, but that was right at the start, and that was purely because we had to go around the bridge closures, and the only other, trying to avoid some of that stuff. But other than that, it's really, really, really good sort of adventure bike, mid-weight riding for those that are sort of new to the adventure bike scene and want to start getting some experience taking their bikes off-road. This is one of the most ideal locations I've seen in a long time. Seen out of, if I wasn't in the northeast rather than the southwest of Victoria, this would probably be one of the first places I would take an adventure bike to start getting used to it in the off-road capacity, just because, it was really wet when we were out there and it was still fine. In terms of the ability to sort of track through it and stuff like that, and there was nothing insane. There's no ridiculous hill climbs or anything like that. Surface pretty straightforward and all that. And that segues perfectly to the fact that there's a whole wide range of surfaces, a lot of gravel and sort of grass-covered, dirty sections. There was a lot of that when we were out there, especially on that sort of the east side, but as you get closer to the coast, you're getting to that sort of more sand style surfaces. I thought it was pretty deep, but after experiencing Hattah, that sand was absolutely nothing. Other than when we were in the sandpit section, which you would have seen some footage of that earlier in the video, the sand at Hattah was a lot deeper. A lot harder to get through, but some of the ease of this region's sand was because it was a bit hard packed because of the moisture. As you know, sand sort of hardens, which is why it's really easy to make sandcastles by using wet sand. So really, really, sort of varied types of tracks. So try and if you're one of those people that really changes their pressures and things like that, obviously try and switch your pressures depending on where you plan on going. But some of them you go from gravel like what's showing here to sort of deep, not deep sand, but sand, quite deep sand. You can avoid a lot of the main roads in this area. I know some areas are notorious where you have to traverse across bitumen highways for a little bit to try and get between places, even where you're parked and where you want to go. But this area, you'll find that other than a few spots, you can actually pretty well and truly avoid bitumen with no problem. Next thing is sort of the options that you have. There is a lot. There is so many different little tracks and things like that. We did 2 days out here and we skipped a lot of it, and we still felt like a couple of good 3, 4 hour, 5 hour rides each day, and still didn't really find anything that didn't explore all of that area. And there's quite a few tracks that were out of reach because of the bridge closure. Just because of how much we had to detour and stuff like that, that you find that that you couldn't really get access to them because of that bridge closure. But it should be, it was supposed to have been repaired about June 2022, so probably just a little bit over 6 months before you see this video. So the last thing to sort of talk about is sort of the views and the scenery. This is where it really comes. This, Southwest Victoria is actually really beautiful when you're close to the coast. Can't really talk for anywhere else because I haven't really been too much in the non-coastal parts of Southwest Victoria, but there's some awesome views of the coastline. There's a few historical areas that if you do the old Great Ocean Road, so the dirt track that comes off it, at certain points, which is actually where the footage you're seeing right now is. You can find some old historical areas and stuff like that, and they're really awesome to see. And read a little bit about Australia's history, and there's awesome farmland that you pass through as well. But the one thing is the awesome views of the coast that you get, which you'll see in a second. We're just coming up on it now. This was actually one of my favourite parts of the weekend. We're just seeing this awesome view of the southwest coast of Victoria. It just looks amazing. It's a great view of the hills. We didn't stop here for too long, just because the weather was actually a bit average when we were out there, and it was a bit windy and stuff like that. And I had to get back to Melbourne on this day, so it was we were trying to get ourselves sorted and get going, and I was on the east of the Melbourne, so it was a bit bit of a rush, but awesome views, worth seeing, worth making the trip to go out for. So yeah, that's sort of my opinion of this. It's definitely one to put on the list. It's definitely one you adventure bike riders could make as part of like a weekend trip, or a trip over a few days. Definitely one I would suggest doing those. I would probably suggest just the time of the year, probably September, October, or late March, early April, just because it's going to be way too hot for that sort of thing in the December, January period, and then way too wet during the sort of June, July part of the year. That's just my opinion. Take it as you will. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.